Good evening, everyone. My name is Daphna Rabinovich, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our third Giller Book Club, following our two highly successful ones. Please check our website for the complete list and to register every month. You really don't want to miss a single one. And please make sure to have your Zoom on a side-by-side view for the best possible experience. It is my profound pleasure tonight to introduce you to two outstanding women. This book club is focused on Shani Mootoo, whose mesmerizing novel, Polar Vortex, was shortlisted for last year's Scotiabank Giller Prize. And our interviewer tonight is Claire Armitstead, who is tuning in all the way from London, England, where it's about midnight. Claire served on our jury last year and is also the literary critic for The Guardian. She and Shani will spend the next hour discussing Polar Vortex, and Shani will also do a reading. Plus, there's a bit of a surprise here tonight as well. Please don't forget to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit questions. And now, I don't want to waste any more of your time, so without further ado, please welcome Claire and Shani.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hi, hello, Shani.
Hi.
It
Hi,
feels
Priya.
like I feel a very long way away. And welcome everybody to tonight's discussion, which I'm very excited about because I really love this book, and it was a book that was very hotly discussed all the way through the judging process. So I think I can speak for all my fellow judges as well. That Polar Vortex was absolutely up there. Now, Shani was born in Ireland and grew up in Trinidad and now lives in Canada. And this book has a lot of elements of all those influences. It's in some ways it's a chamber novel. It doesn't have very many characters. It's in a very small setting, but it also reflects the whole world. And Shani is also a visual artist who works across paintings, videos, and photography. And I think it is also very photographic, and we will also have the benefit of tuning into some of her visual work just to amplify some of the points. Polar Vortex is, I think, your fifth novel. Is that right, Shani?
Yes, that's right.
Fifth novel, but she's also written published poetry and short stories. She came to my attention, although when I was reading Polar Vortex, I didn't realize this. I hadn't made the connection back in 1997 when Sirius Blooms at Night was longlisted for the Booker Prize, which was her very first novel. So she has had an incredibly successful, I think every book pretty much has been longlisted or shortlisted for something. The list of awards and residencies and things is off the scale. So a very warm welcome, Shani.
Thank you, Claire. I'm really glad to be doing this with you.
So this is a novel about two women in a relationship whose sort of happy domestic life is interrupted by a stranger. In a way, it's a stranger calls novel. Tell us a little bit about the central relationships.
Priya and Alex have moved from the city. It's a new relationship. They moved to the countryside and they're living blissfully. They've sort of left friendships and so on behind, and they're making new friendships in the countryside town that they're living in. And suddenly, out of the blue, Priya announces to Alex that an old friend of hers is coming to visit. And Alex wants to know who this is. Turns out to be a man whom Priya knew from a long time ago. Now, Alex has the impression that there are things that she doesn't know about Priya, and how could she? They've been only together for 6 years so far. But it's a bit more sinister than that, she thinks. And she wants to know who this man is. And that's basically, so he comes, the novel takes place in a day, in the space of a day. And, but there's backstory and so on. And Alex is really nervous. Who is this man? Why is he coming into their house? Why, not only that, but why hasn't Priya told her anything about this man before? And especially if he's going to be spending the night with them, surely that means, she should have told us something.
But it's interesting that you're telling the story from Alex's point of view, because Alex's perspective doesn't actually come in until the second section of the novel. We see all this happening from Priya's point of view.
That's right. Um, I don't know why I just told it like that. I think I think Priya is a really complex character, and to try to sum her up is quite difficult. Um, and in a way, it's why I introduced Alex in the novel. Many people have asked me; they've said they were enjoying Priya's voice, her prevarications, and so on. Why did I bring Alex in? Well, I don't know how long they would have been able to really stand Priya's constant shifting,
Mm.
And Alex reveals more about Priya. It's not really Alex's story. She is also revealing Priya.
Yes, and I mean, it's also the difference between story and plot, isn't it? That's good storytelling. It's interesting that in your head there is a story happening, which is also happening in our heads, but we don't realize it through that first section, quite how balanced it is. But let's
Yeah.
have a little reading just to set the tone of the relationship, if you don't mind.
Sure. So Alex and Priya have been having these constant conversations. Alex wants to know, who is this man? And Priya is, she's he's a friend, he's a friend. So on it goes. And this is Alex speaking, this first line. Then we get into Priya's voice and then back to Alex. I guess that's the thing about getting older, isn't it? Alex said. She and I had been chatting just days ago, pleasantly at last, as if all was well between us. And then she came at it from what she might have thought of as slightly higher ground. We start searching for anyone and everyone we used to know in our younger days. That's what social media has done to us. It makes us imagine we can create this expansive story, this full picture of our lives, stitch every single recorded moment of our pasts and presents together seamlessly. Everyone's an artist these days, Priya, creating self-portraits, portraits via social media of their world. Now what? I thought. But I didn't bite. And so she just came right out with it. We're different, Priya, you and I. In regards to our pasts, we only know what we tell each other. You have more in common with this man than you have with me. Isn't that so? You have a history with him. You and I, we don't share a past. I'm impressed that he, a straight married man, the father of 3 children, would come all the way down here to seek you out after so many years. And he intends to spend a night. What doesn't make sense is that he'd come on his own without his family. This is unusual for an Indian man, isn't it? What does his wife think of all of this? I wonder. And I have to ask, I'm just saying, why you have encouraged or allowed this. I think it's a bit much, don't you? This didn't deserve my defensiveness, but I couldn't stop myself. For God's sake, Alex. What? Yes, I had a life before you. So had you before me. A good part of it in different countries. There's a lot we can't know about each other. Am I supposed to just chop off my past? Is this a prison I'm in? Are we so tied to each other that we can't have any thoughts or feelings or ideas or friendships that aren't shared? Why won't you accept that an enduring and platonic relationship between a straight Indian man and a lesbian, as unconventional as it might simply be refreshing? And how do you expect me to know what his wife thinks? I can't imagine he'd come down here if it weren't fine with her. Enough now, seriously, leave it alone. but she wouldn't. One of the differences between us, Priya, is that your boundaries are far more fluid than mine. I let her continue as she launched into her elaborate explanation. You come from a place where family and friends are in each other's lives every day, Priya. You miss your family in Trinidad, your friends in Toronto, your food from back home, the constant closeness, the ceaseless chatter between people. I left my family because I wanted independence. I don't need to hold on to the past. I left Toronto for peace and quiet and to be left alone to think. Where you come from, no one's an acquaintance, everyone's a friend. And you're bringing this into our home. You should have asked me. You should have asked. You're in a relationship, Priya. You're not the only one living in this house. You can't simply do whatever you want.
Thank you. That just sets their relationship up so well, and also
That's what it
reveals
is.
partly of it reveals why it's such a much bigger novel than how I originally described it as a sort of closed chamber novel. So let's just unpick some of that passage. First of all, everyone's an artist these days. And this links into the sort of big theme about self-portraiture and social media, the great continuum between a social life and an artistic representation of oneself in the
Yes.
world.
You know, one of the things that I enjoy about writing, for me, I'm I'm telling a story, and it's almost as if the story creates itself out of ideas that I'm trying to work out in my life. And Priya allows me to do this, and Alex allows me to do this. But so there are things in there that appear to come out of nowhere, and then by the end of the novel, I find that they have really worked out nicely. Now, the social media thing, I'm always thinking about this, how people try to, Priya is an artist and Alex is a theorist. Um, and basically it's about how social media, the idea that I had where I was working from is how social media basically allows people nowadays to put their whole lives. And the older you get, the earlier the photographs are that are put up on social media, you know, like Instagram, for instance. And people get to create this picture of themselves, and that comes there. I think there's an antecedent in video art and performance art with people like Vito Conchi when he did Seedbed in New York in the 1970s, and Marina Abramovich when she did the hair, the brushing. You know, there was the constant brushing, and we're watching her do this for the longest time. They're these private moments that then become public. And I see it happening in an interesting way on social media, where people who don't have professional art practices can create personalities. They can create, they can become whoever they want to become. And we don't know what the truth of their lives really is. And that's another theme that runs through. We don't really know who, you know, you saw it in that passage there.
She thinks that, and it very much comes up with Prakash, that they were friends at university, but they haven't seen each other since. But they think they're still good friends, partly because they've kept connected in this artificial way, although their lives have diverged in ways that then become clear.
Yes, but the thing is that to escape him, Priya actually comes off social media when she moves to the countryside. She has to get rid of this past. And as soon what she feels many years have gone by, and she decides to go on Twitter, and within seconds he's there. So has he been looking for her all the time, or did he just come upon her accidentally? But you know, so it's like you can't really run from the past. Not only are you putting it up constantly on social media, which is one of the reasons you can't run from it, but also I think there's so much surveillance in so many different ways now
Um,
that
we're going to have most of the questions later after we've had this chat for about 45 minutes. But we did get one question in via Instagram from at Herd's Library, who made a very, very smart point, I think, which is that the social media almost felt like a third person in Priya's relationships. And was this intentional? And I hadn't thought of it like that, but actually that's right, isn't it?
yes. I wouldn't say that it was intentional. Perhaps at the end of the manuscript, I might have gone back and made some of these little things a little stronger, about like that bit that I read there actually did come at the end. So I made it a bit stronger. But as I was saying, these ideas, there's so many little ideas throughout the entire novel that talking about how we exist, in family, in how we create ourselves and so on. And they will come up for me, and that's one of them. So I wasn't 100% like wanting to work this through there, but gosh, social media is so much a part of our lives now that how could it not somehow? I've never ever written about, used a computer even, or cell phone or anything in any of my other novels. I don't think so. But this one, it was there. It was all there.
So this idea of being that everybody is different in regards to their pasts, and it's almost like there's a sexual jealousy that Alex has uh, for the person that Priya was once before they knew each other, or might have been before they knew each other. And I find that a very interesting dynamic, because it doesn't really belong to her present, the thing that Alex is jealous of.
Yes, and I see that Priya is also, remember when Priya meets Alex's, they meet her girlfriends on the street, and it, Priya can tell that there is unfinished business there. And instead of standing and looking to see what it was, Priya actually decides she's going to run across the road and allow them to finish it because she feels a certain confidence. Well, the more interesting thing for me is, why did she do that? And why was she so confident that she could run across the street? And they were, and Alex has this whole other idea. And I think it's because Alex realizes that they've only been together for a short while, and she really doesn't know who this person is that she's living with. And as time goes on, more and more she's seeing that there seem to be secrets, and it's not really because Priya has all these secrets. It's because Priya doesn't know who she is, and she spent her life trying to become herself, trying to figure out who she is. And I think that's what she's kind of really shape shifting constantly because of that. And I think that has to do with immigration and queerness and so on. So Alex is seeing something. She wants to know. She wants to know who this person is. But Priya is not, even this person who's her closest person, and she won't reveal herself.
Mm-hmm. So Priya is Trinidadian, we've said, as you
Yes.
are. As I mean, I don't know whether you consider yourself to be Trinidadian. You spent your formative years there, so
Yes,
you
yes,
probably do. Um, and and Prakash is a Ugandan Indian,
yes,
and there's some conversation about Prakash's wife, who we don't meet, being
yes,
from India, an Indian Indian.
yes,
Will you talk a little bit about this Indian diaspora to which Priya belongs and you belong?
yes. Well, when I lived in Trinidad, when I was growing up in Trinidad, it was the time of the Black Power Revolution and things like that, and the the tensions were between blacks, that's people of African descent who are Trinidadian, and Indian Trinidadians. And it's only when I came to Canada So we didn't think of ourselves as Indian from India. Yes, yes, you're Indian, but it had nothing to do with India. And when I arrived in Canada, um, people started, asking me if I was from India or if I was from Pakistan and so on. And then at that time, I actually began to meet Indians from different places, and it was fascinating to me. And one of the things that always sort of bothered me was that English is the only language that I spoke. So I was the least authentic of all the Indians that I knew. And I remember one time actually, my sister and one of my sisters and my little brother, we were in England with my parents for something. And we were across from the law courts. So I was about 15, the other one was about 10. And we're standing there, our little Indian selves, and feeling very, you know, we didn't even have another language to speak to make us, we thought, exotic. So we said to each other, let's make up a language so that we can be exotic. And we started speaking with each other in these made up words. And, it's so that tension remains for me, so sort of a humorous thing. Who's the real Indian? And does language make a person? So Prakash and I forget his wife's name, but she's from India. They both speak Hindi, but she lords it over him because his family left India and went to Uganda. And one of the things that I enjoyed with that story, I mean, his story is revealed about the expulsion um, from Uganda by Idi Amin. And that's an interesting story. And it's a story that was told to me by a friend, actually. And I said, tell me more. I want to write this. Partly because it made me think about the difference between, I remember when the Ugandans were expelled and nobody wanted them. And the way the Syrians are treated right now. And I always wonder what the Ugandans feel about the Syrians at this particular point. I mean, when we went to London that same time, and I was 15, my grandparents who were living in England, they took us to Wembley to see the Indians, to see the Ugandans. And that's the distance we had as Trinidadians from these other people who looked like us. And.
So the difference between Prakash and Priya, in a way, is that she hasn't had that jeopardy in her past in the way that Prakash has. Would you say that's fair?
No, I don't think that's what it is. I think it is that she is lesbian and she does not want him to know that.
Mm.
And you see, what brings them together is their skin color. Something as you look at a person and you see, you see a reflection of yourself until you begin to interact with them, and then you begin to see all the differences and so on. So they become friends as sort of like it's a survival kind of friendship. And but he's interested in her as a girlfriend, and he is not interested in him. But the presence in her life allows him, in the presence of him in her life allows her to appear straight, and in terms of the communities that he wouldn't want to be out in, normal.
So we've talked about identity, and you've also tackled that a lot in your artwork. And we've got a few slides. I wonder if you could show your slides, the first lot of slides, and talk a little bit through what they mean to you, what they represent. Sure. So that's slides 4, 5, and 6, isn't it? Yes.
Right. Yes. So these slides are they're photographs of Trinidad, and it's interesting, Claire, because these photographs were recently made, and It's as if I wasn't able to photograph the inside of the house before writing Polar Vortex. Um, Polar Vortex does not isn't centered on Trinidad. Trinidad doesn't play a huge role in the novel. I feel as if by the time I got to Polar Vortex, in a way, I had left the yearning for Trinidad. When in the past, before before Polar Vortex, when I was taking photographs at home and so on, it would be the lush gardens. It would be the serious blooms at night kind of gardens, with all the greenery and the beautiful flowers and so on. And I think it's because every time I went back home, the house was deteriorating and I couldn't bear that part. By the time we can have a look at the next slide. By the time I took these photographs, I felt like in a way, I had left Trinidad. This used to be a really lovely guest room in the house. That's now, these beds were taken from an outside room and brought in here, and I don't know what has happened to it. There are stories now in the house that I do not understand. But I can stand back now and photograph it as a photographer. I can see the photograph. It is not about, it's not about trying to hold on to past. The other thing is that when you come to a place like Canada, and you're a brown person, people tend to think that you've left because things were rough at home and you had to get away. And my feeling is that I couldn't show the truth of the crumbling house. I had to show the magnificent house that it was earlier on. Can we show the next one, please? And I was I was freed of that. And I was freed of that because I no longer wanted to be in two places, playing the political and identity game that I feel that many of us are forced in a kind of a way to play in order to have currency as artists and writers and so on. If we're of color and we're immigrants to the country and so on, we that gives us currency. And I have felt that being in two places means that I was never in either one really fully. And it makes for, it means you can't love the place that you're in. You can't see it. So anyway, this is these are, yeah, I think we can see ourselves again.
So we're back. It does
Did-
it does it does contextualize it. It does contextualize it all very well. So we're now going to park that whole aspect, because this will come up, I'm sure, in questions. And I want to, now you've talked about not belonging. So now let's talk about what you do belong to. And it's in particular in this novel, there's a very, very strong sense of landscape, of location. And funnily enough, Shani actually sent me a short video of the snow outside her house today. And I was saying, Shani, you've stolen the bird feeders. It's exactly the house I imagined. So it's not in a city. They've moved out. It's sort of quite desolate. It certainly looked as if it was in a blizzard, so it would be desolate. Talk a little bit about what that particular landscape means to you.
Well, so from the time I was a child, my favorite place is outside. It's in the mountains. It's in the forests, in the trees, and with the trees and the plants. I used to be able to know every single wild plant name and tree, and the water. You're surrounded by the sea all the time, and I found that I was always looking from from here across this landmass, dreaming of Trinidad, wanting Trinidad, you know? So I couldn't be where I was. When I moved to the countryside, because I moved to the countryside, and this is what sort of you know, made this novel come alive in my head. When I moved here, I thought to myself, in the city, you can't really see the land. You're engaged in these, you're constantly moving in communities that are talking about back home all the time. And so you're never present. So when I moved down here, and at the time there were, I could count on my hand the number of people of color I would see. And that I, you know, that was hard. That was very, very difficult to take at first. I really missed the, yes, I missed the food and I missed the people and so on. But the other thing I began to see was the landscape. And I began to see that I could look at rivers and lakes, and that could become my new water. And we can, in a couple of minutes, we can look at a couple of the slides of images. And I began to realize that what I knew of Canada was the vast, the tourist view, the mountains, you know, the snow and the lake and the glaciers and so on. But I didn't know what was at my feet. I didn't know the minutiae. And that's what I wanted to start photographing and learning it.
Mhm. But it's also the title Polar Vortex is it's set very much in a very difficult time of the middle of the winter in a sort of unusual weather condition or climate condition in a way, is it? And
Yes,
maybe it
and
isn't
so,
unusual in Canada.
well, so trying to put this landscape and the weather into this mouth, this Trinidadian mouth, looking for the colors of Trinidad on one hand and trying to write snow on the other hand. You know, I mean, you might see an entire white band from, say, Peter Minshaw at a carnival time or something like that. But otherwise, it's the colors of nature, you know, just wild. And here we are in white, a white wonderland. How do I put those words into my mouth? How do I see? Now, the interesting thing is that I could approach writing that. I cannot photograph it still, not only because white is so difficult to photograph in terms of you know, f-stops and stuff like that, but um, I could go into the lakes with my friend Sheila Mathers, who's also a writer here, but she, you know, she has a place on Lake Opinicon, and she would take me on the boat, and I could look not at the beautiful islands and homes and so on. I could look down at the side of the boat. I could see the buoy in the water, and that becomes my version of the, you know, the what's it, the painters, the group of seven artists, this the immigrant of color from the Caribbean trying to find my group of seven moment.
Mhm.
And
Will
it's
you
in those
will you,
looking down.
will you read a bit? There's a little bit of it from the novel which demonstrates this really well. This looking down.
Okay. And those three photographs will show that as well, what I'm
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
All right, so meters from us,
We're not looking at
massive.
the slides quite yet. Oh, are we going to look at the slides at the same time? Sorry.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't
No,
think
so
so.
not the slides. We'll just have the reading.
Yes. Okay. Meters from us, massive iceberg-like formations, frozen waves piled one atop the other. Knife-edged cliffs jutted out of the ice boulders into the sky and then dropped off into gem-like blue and green canyons. I had brought my window down a fraction, and we listened. A heaving, thumping rebellion came from beneath the surface. It wasn't a stretch to imagine water undulating, restless, captive, wanting an escape from all that ice. It felt as if the force of the moving water beneath might actually any second wrench the boulders above from whatever anchored them and send them skidding toward the road, shoving us into trees, or more mercifully, simply crushing us flat. What seemed like a choreographed row of geysers, 7 powerful spouts, one after the other in quick succession, rose every few minutes into the air. I'll never forget the tinkling one minute like a crystal chandelier in an earthquake, and that insistent thumping, I say, and then I laugh. And you told me then that Lake Ontario was the smallest of the Great Lakes and the 13th largest in the world. Alex nods. It sounded alive, as if it were breathing. The music from the blowholes, it was like a strange tune played on an oboe, she says. And although she remains glum, I feel grateful. And do you remember you quoted Hardy? I asked. She takes a puff and nods. After her long exhalation, she says, the sun was white as though chidden of God. I wasn't surprised that she knew Hardy's poem, but I was impressed that out of her brain she was able to pick an appropriate literary phrase to describe the scene in front of us. Impressed, but not surprised. On the way home in another more sheltered section of the lake, where swans are known to gather for the winter, I brought the Carter crawl so we could see how they were faring. On the glass surface, we counted 13 swans frozen stiff, some as if in full swim, some off kilter, some sprawled on the surface, their wings unnaturally bent, stuck in parts to the ice, while tips of the feathers flapped in the wind. That was this same year, just 11 months ago. The feeders in our yard had remained empty until the middle of what was supposedly spring, but still felt like winter. The moment I was able to, I went out and filled them up. But for weeks on end, no birds came. The seeds in the feeders stayed untouched and mosses flared up the sides of the clear plastic tubes. The songbird population, particularly the little chickadees and the juncos and finches, had suffered because ice had encased their food supplies, and we humans hadn't been able to provide for them. I would not have experienced any of this had we not moved from the city. It has felt like some kind of privilege, albeit at that time a sad one.
Yeah, you get such a strong sense of a world that's sort of locked in a way.
What I really like, Claire, is when I began to write the book, I didn't intend to write these things, but in writing the book, it gave me an opportunity to write these things that I was noticing and really loving. And the amazing thing is that at the end of it, it all really works because, of course, the novel ends close to the lake again, right? In a
Yeah.
different situation. Yeah.
Yeah. So water is very important in your work, and yeah,
Yes.
to talk about, you mentioned the difference between the sea, which you were next to in Trinidad or surrounded by in Trinidad, and finding an echo of it and an answer to it in the Great Lakes.
Let's have a look at the photographs, the three of them. Start my video. Okay, there we go. So this is Lake Ontario beating against the concrete foundation of a parking lot in Kingston. And um, what what attracted me to this is about 3 or 4 years ago when we had those amazing floods. So everything with, the lake was so high, it was coming up into people's backyards and into their basements and so on. Now, this was really fascinating to me because had this been seawater, which is what I was accustomed to, so sometimes I call Lake Ontario the ocean or the sea, when there are big waves and so on, constantly looking for that ocean. I am. And and the colors of the coconut trees and the homes on and the shells and so on. And here in this moment, I felt like I found the colors. Looking down and just photographing, I was at a railing and I put the camera on the railing, uh, and set it up and stuff like that. And I took this, and there, in many ways, are the shells and the. Now, if it were at the seaside, the erosion here would be quite different. There would be different colors. The sea eats away at concrete. It eats away at everything. It just devours it. And here the metal was coming through and creating this amazing color. So there comes a point. Can we see the next one, please? There comes a point where I'm no longer looking for Trinidad, but seeing the beauty in the space that I'm in. Thank you. And this is Lake Opinacon, looking just not too far from where we are in the boat. And now, if I tilted the camera up, yes, there's a beautiful island and all these wonderful trees with their lovely reddish barks and so on, and the shoreline with the rocks and so on. But I did not want the tourist view. Once again, I wanted to see what this water was like. I don't know water like this in Trinidad. Perhaps in a river or something, but with the buoy, that those particular colors and so on. Can we see the next one, please? But being near the water is absolute heaven for me. Now, I'm really, really uncomfortable in the snow. I'm afraid of it. And the way I was able to get around that is coming to this again, the flooded river, with the telephone pole was submerged. The base of it was submerged, and there was the reflection. These are places that I'm very, very drawn to. And so, Claire,
Yeah,
can we see each other again?
we'll get back. We'll return to
Yes.
reality. Um,
Yeah.
you there? We don't have your video. Oh, yeah, we've got it now. So, as you're writing from a position of minorities, as somebody who's gay and as somebody who is an Indian in Trinidad and a Trinidadian in Canada. And often people say if you're writing from the position of a minority, you carry a burden of having to be political. You carry your politics on your back, you're strapped to them.
Yes.
How have you managed to free yourself as an artist and as a writer?
So a great deal. So when I left Trinidad, I came to be an artist, a visual artist. And when I came, my artwork was, it was like pretty this and pretty that. And it's when I realized that I couldn't get shows and so on because I was not a Canadian, which back, 30, 40 years ago meant I was not white, had not been brought up here and so on. And I was not painting the Canadian landscape. That was the particular moment in Vancouver. I landed in Vancouver. And my work was very, very political for a very long time. Um, I kept yearning to go back to work that was about the medium, about the gesture, about the act of creating, and at the same time, how could you do that? How could you do that when there was so much political work that needed to be done? And I did that for a very, very long time. I would say that by um, moving forward sideways like a crab, where I was challenged by a writer to stop writing about home, about all these things, that, stop longing and be where I am. And that really hit me hard. And I feel as if I'm an older person. If I don't do it now, when will I do it? And the fight doesn't end. It goes on and on. It seems like, all the work that we were doing 40 years ago in terms of activism and so on, the bloody work still needs to be done. It's not going to stop. So I think that there are people who can do that work now, who will continue to do it. I was shocked to see young people at a conference, very young people, speaking the same words that we were speaking 40 years ago. And I feel it's time for me to be where I am and not to be schizophrenic in my longing and in my identity.
Great. Well, we've got loads of questions coming in. So although we could go on talking for hours, I'm going to have to bow down to the audience who are all eager to ask you questions. Somebody says, Jane M. Howard says, given the distinction between black and, oops, it's just slipped down. Sorry, I've lost it. It suddenly slipped out of my sight line. I'm going to have to go for another one. When you're feeding questions through, can you wait? Because if you put one in while I'm answering, they slip out of my sight line. So Joanne Stevenson says, Priya walks out of the door of her home at the end of the book. Has she learnt enough about herself to have a good relationship? Are we to assume that she will not be with Alex again? Would she have lost confidence in her judgment of people? That's Joanne Stevenson, yes. That's a bit of a spoiler, isn't it?
Well, a bit, but I think that there's so much drama at the end there that there is still something to be told out. I don't know. I think that once you're running, it's hard to stop running. So I can't imagine. But as I've said with all my novels, when people ask me what happened afterwards, I tell them, please, I give you permission to write it. It's yours now. I'm finished with it.
I found Jolene Smith again, who says, I absolutely love Polar Vortex, a woman of good taste, and enjoyed having both perspectives to shine a light on Priya. Did you ever consider having some of the story told from Prakash's point of view?
I did, Jolene. Thank you for that question. I did think about it, and I felt in some ways that Prakash, I began to like Prakash more by the time I finished the novel. But he also was meant to illuminate something about Priya, because I don't want to give away too much, but Priya has a different understanding or different memories than Prakash has. And it's when Priya begins to understand why Prakash has come to visit her that more is revealed about Priya. It's not really to give Prakash the voice. I don't know it. No. Yeah. It would not have worked. And so much of this for me, it is a sensibility of feeling. I don't have an agenda while I'm working through it.
So now another one from Jane M. Howard, who says, given the distinction between Black and Indian Trinidadians that created the tension you described, if it wasn't about being Indian and Black, what was the distinction and tension about? Now, it wasn't about Black and Indian Trinidadians, was it? It's about Indian, it's about African origin. I mean, they're all Indian, but it's Indians from Uganda and Indians from Trinidad.
I wonder if Jane is talking about the tensions in Trinidad that I'd spoken about.
Probably.
If she is talking about the tensions in Trinidad, it was a moment of of a country trying not to be defined by Black or Indian, which was the differences between the two were amplified by the British divide and rule. kind of method, you know. And uh, I think when after independence, what the country was trying to do was to find a national identity, and it was almost as if they were trying to create a national identity. And Blacks and Indians were basically fighting for, well, which would be more the correct identity, you know, of, and that's the tension between them there, if that's what Jane was talking about.
Mhm. And another Trinidad question from Sophie Jai. Do you think you'll write about Trinidad again? And if so, in what context?
Um, it, I, I, yes, yes, you know, it forms a lot of my thinking. Polar Vortex is, you know, when I talk about wanting to be here, when I land here, and I have not yet landed, but when I land here, or maybe I never will land here. When I do, I will always bring Trinidad with me. It will always be part of the story. It can't not be. At this point, Canada will always be part of the story as well. So it's not like I'm not going to write about Trinidad again. Yeah.
So I've got a couple of questions. We've got a couple of questions about choices, structural choices. One from Carol Bashara, who says, love this book. I'm curious to know why you chose to set the polar vortex the previous winter instead of during the action of the novel. That's an interesting question.
It is a very good question. And the answer to that has to do, Carol, with what I was saying before about how I write. I am, you know, as I've said before, I don't write with a plot. The story sort of finds itself. And that comes out of my visual art practice as well. Uh, and I began the story in, I actually began it during the month of maybe November or December. And the previous year was the polar vortex year. So I began to remember the polar vortex aspect and then put that in because I wanted to write it. And you know, this is what I keep saying. It's like it's so amazing. You I think of this the brain, the writing brain, as a vessel, and everything in it will be as logical as outside. It's like a universe that just mirrors what's, you know, what's already outside. So if I honestly, sincerely, really try to follow, and this is the difficult part, um, different kinds of logic, I I don't have to worry about how it's going to work out. At the end of it, I read it and it's like, wow, you know, it works. And something doesn't work. Often when something doesn't work, it's because I'm telling a lie. It's because I try to force something in that shouldn't be there.
That's a good answer. Another one from Wendy Russell Shepherd, who says, hello from Belleville, Ontario. I am wondering about your process to determine structure, especially in the first section, the bed.
Well, it was a difficult section to write, Wendy. How do you keep a reader interested when this person is lying in bed for, you know, I don't remember how many pages, but it's almost 100 pages. And she keeps thinking she should get up. And then there's a reason why she doesn't. Why she thinks, oh, I'll just wait a few more minutes or so. That was very, very difficult to write. I spent a great deal of time working on this before Alex even came into the picture. And it's one of the reasons that Alex had to come in. So in a kind of a sense, the structure that was imposed on the novel was not within the bed scene, but the bed scene imposed the Alex voice. And what I had to keep doing was bringing up these pasts, these incidents from the past that mirrored Priya's moment in the bed. which is the periods in the past that she's thinking about were all about, should I do this or should I do this? Should I have done this? Perhaps I meant to do this. This is what I should do right now. No, 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 you know. So it mirrors it. And that's one of the ways that I was able to find, it's a sort of a mirroring or a rhyming structure throughout. But it really is Alex that it created. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So now we've got a couple of relationship questions. From Sabrina Baker, why do you think Priya had to extricate herself from her past?
I would say that she was probably running most from this relationship where possibly because in her relationship with Alex she had found some kind of peace maybe, and whenever she had a relationship that didn't work or something, Prakash was always there. He was always showing up. He wanted to be there for her. And I think when she realizes that this is the relationships that she's going to make work, she needs to get away from him. Does that answer the question? I know Sabrina can't tell, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think it does. Although it doesn't sort of answer the whole of her past, because she also had the relationship with Fiona, didn't she? There are other relationships in her past.
Right. Well, the one with Fiona, I believe, didn't that end because she had to leave? She was
Well,
on a
Fiona had another girlfriend, didn't she? Oh, had a boyfriend. Yes,
yeah,
had another relationship. Yeah,
right.
yeah, yes. So yes, I think you have answered
But
it.
in all of that time, she's trying to figure out who she is. So she becomes this and she becomes that and she does this and that, and none of it makes her feel good. She feels like she's lying all the time or hiding or running. And so when she meets Alex, she wants to stop all of that. But as I said earlier, I think once you're running, you probably will always be running.
Mhm. Noni Rabinovich asks, is Alex as guilty or more than Priya for being deceitful or clandestine with her relationship? Oh, we haven't talked about this at all. Yes, this is a good one.
Can you read the last part again?
Is Alex as guilty or more than Priya for being deceitful or clandestine with her relationship?
I feel that's giving away a little too much, but because I work really hard to um anyway, it's a good question, and I don't actually like this thing that I think of as a North American way of always having to blame one side. I think um, I think it's far more interesting when you realize that both sides are acting in their best interests, which means that they're playing each other. And yes, I think it's too easy to say you are right and you are wrong, or you should be punished for this, or I think all the sides have some part to play in it.
Mhm. Um,
There are a
Liz
lot of
Ball-
things that happen in the book that basically they're me exploring ideas that I have about life, you know.
I'm rushing it slightly because we're just about out of time. Liz Ball says, I was in Uganda during Amin's coup. I felt that Alex was very insensitive to Prakash's experience. Would you comment on the use of the immigrant experience in the book from Uganda and on to the Syrian? How do you see this influencing Priya and Alex's relationship?
Well, I think once again you realize that Alex has moments when she really feels something for Prakash, but Prakash is not really in the room. This is entirely about Priya and Alex, even when Prakash is there. Now, you can think that she was not sensitive, and yes, she was not sensitive, but neither was Prakash being sensitive in many ways. He was basically trying to win Alex. He was trying to create a particular persona, and Alex was there's this thing going on between the two of them, and Alex has this whole story that's about to unfold herself. That to try to impose the politics of race on top of it right now, I think doesn't see the entire picture. And it's one of the things, Liz, that I was really interested in doing in the whole book. Nothing is quite so simple. Nothing is quite so simple. And it's not a book about Indians or whites or one kind of Indian and another kind, or men and women, or lesbians and straight people. It's not about that. It's the complexities. It's so complex. And if only we can recognize those complexities a bit more and have more conversation rather than looking to see who did what wrong, I think we'd be a happier place.
And that seems a brilliant place to end, actually. There's Anne and Theobald say, Shani, I still remember your reading at Harvard Street Bookstore in the 90s.
Oh my gosh, who is that?
Alan and Theobald, the addresses.
Yes, how nice to hear from him. Yes, yes.
And Janice Mackay says, I love Polar Vortex. I just have one quick question. Has to be quick because it's 1 minute past. Is Stan from Preston NS? I love the reference. I work very closely with the community.
Is Stan from?
Is Stan from Preston NS?
I have no idea.
Love the reference. I work very closely with the community. That's drawn a blank.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for asking that question.
You'll have to have a bookshop meeting with Janice once all this is over.
Yes,
thank you so much, Shani, for a fascinating talk, and thank you everybody who's been here tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'm certainly going to go and read all the books by Shani that I haven't read yet, of which there are several, and also to look up her artwork.
Thanks, Faye. Hey, I want to say thank you very, very much to the Scotiabank Giller Club, Book Club, and to Daphna for organizing this, Emma, Prue, and Jake for taking care of the technical aspects. And Claire, I love doing this with you. Thank you so much.
It was a great pleasure. Thanks.
Oh my gosh, thank you both, Claire and Shani. I just found that riveting. And thank you so much, Shani, for sharing your artwork with us. That was a wonderful addition and surprise. And thank you, as Claire said, for joining us this evening and for also providing such insightful, provocative questions. Those were fabulous. I hope you enjoyed hearing from our author and our past jury member. And don't forget, this interview will be available on our YouTube channel over the next couple of days. Thank you.